Well, so I finally got all the tune-up parts. We have new flexible fuel line, fuel filter, spark plug, and basically 3 air filters. There's the main one, the orange one. I also have a new carburetor, which is right there. So it's always a good idea to look over, you know, new parts that you're about to put on, whatever you're gonna do, basically, and just compare them to the old one. And here's the old one. Looks like everything's the same so far. Mostly anyways. This is a Huey. I know I'm pronouncing that wrong, but whatever. The big thing is if it's going to work or not. All the reviews for this Chinese one were saying that they work fine. Everybody was having good luck with them, so I decided to try it out. But first things first, what we're going to have to do is swap over all the parts that this one doesn't have from this one. Namely this part, your choke control. And so now I have the choke lever installed on the new carburetor, as well as a new piece of fuel tubing. What we need to start attacking now is the actual body of the saw. The first thing I'm going to do is pull this out, and this is that fancy little fuel line that we will be replacing. But before I do that, I've actually got to take the filter off. For that trick, I'm just going to use a carburetor linkage. So it just comes off like so, and just go ahead and pull the old line out. We'll set that aside for now. I'm going to go ahead and take a rag to this and just kind of clean it off again. I've already cleaned it off once before, but it looks like we have some old fuel that got on it. So now we can grab our new fuel line and our new fuel filter. Now what we'll go ahead and do is I'm just inserting the fuel line. It looks like we have to cut it to size it up. It's probably a one-size-fits-all type of deal. And so I'm just grabbing on it with a pair of pliers. Get our new fuel filter, throw that on, and let it rest in there. And we'll line this up. And that's now in place. And so now we're finally onto the carb install. I already went ahead and reconnected this fuel line. Now we have this little guy right down here. It's actually going to marry up to that small black rubberized piece that's coming out of the side of the motor. So it's really easy to do. You pretty much just slide the carburetor back on. This is going to go underneath the carb. It doesn't connect to it. You guys can see the little nipple on the bottom of the carburetor. I'm just pushing it forward. And you can't see it too well on the camera, but I can see it just fine, and it went in just fine. So now I'm just going to make sure that all the lines are connected as they should be. I was not able to get a new carburetor intake gasket in the correct amount of time, so I'm just going to reuse this one. It's still good. It didn't break apart or anything, so I'm not really too worried about it. And if it poses a problem in the future, I'll go ahead and replace it. Now, so I don't forget, I'm also going to go ahead and reinstall the linkage, at least onto the outside of the carburetor. Happy with that. Now, as I mentioned before, both of these fuel lines hook up to the air filter box. So as far as the carburetor is concerned, and every hose or line that's on the unit itself, that's been dealt with. So I've got the air filter box here. The new air filters are in the box. I'm going to go ahead and slip this little gasket back on. There's that. Now all we really need to install right now is this piece right here. We have those two studs that are sticking out, and you got to kind of be careful, but I'm just putting the nut on top of a deep 8mm socket here, and I'm just going to thread them on by hand first, and it is now nice and flat. So I'm going to go back and tighten those up again really quickly here, but first I'm going to go ahead and thread these in. And I'm just threading these two bolts back in at the bottom. Now I'm going to go ahead and connect these fuel lines. We got this one right up here, which just connects to the side. All you do with this one is just reconnect it here. And because this was in such a weird spot over here, I actually had to take that small little vent line out and reconnect it there with a pair of needle nose pliers and got it back in. So now I just have to reinsert this part back onto the saw. Now, according to the manual that I found online, the spark plug gap is 0.020. As you guys can see, that's what I've got on my feeler gauge here. And it is right where it should be. So we can go ahead and install this. And I'm happy with that. So now we can go ahead and finish putting this thing back together. And so here I have the new filter box. Well, this is the old one anyways. But I'm going to go ahead and remove that piece. Remove this old filter. Set that aside. I'm going to tap this thing out. Get all the debris out of it. There's our new air filter. And here's that first pre-filter, which goes right back into here. And we'll go ahead and throw our filter cover and filter back on. And I just take those same screws. And the filter's back on. Choke linkage is working as it should. So now all we got to do is just put the top back on. And before we do that, we'll go ahead and pull out this pre-filter as well. And we'll stick in the new filter. Easy enough. So that'll be ready to go back on once we get the top cover back on. Now for the top cover, I don't know how much of this I'm going to be able to get on camera, but you got to kind of be careful on how you do this, because this linkage needs to go back up into the trigger. Basically what you have to do is grab your linkage, kind of feed it back up while keeping it straight the entire time, lining up everything as far as the bolts go. And that pain in the ass is now back where it should be. So now I'm just going to finish off with putting the rest of the outside of the saw back together. And half choke.